Black Death Fan 5. What is Maggie Smith, the moon phase? Maggie Smith is a phase of the moon, just named that, where everything is religious for no apparent reason or lacking religious bipartisan of ruling over classes, theories, and philosophies, or the phase, regarding when you see it in the sky for supernatural debates, argumentations, and science and nebula theory, as the religion to name the deity of the moon phases and the authority of it is called Homeschooler Catalog based on content and the perverts of it. The phase AI takeover, so self made and knowledgeable toys and debated brains sealed inside computers, which we can prove, but aren't usually what the movies would portray in the order of chronology or experience of it. So, how often those movies are right for the time period is wrong and rare and or hidden. As the religion to name the doctrine phases of the moon is Homeschooler Catalog, which you're watching, the phase of AI takeovers and destruction of free will and thought is the moon phase Maggie Smith. Because of the history of the moon phase, humanity does not BWO to te moon you shits, which is a phase of atheism where the moon grows yellow with moon rock slightly visible as BWO, a type of crest revoked to center or persistent over the entire thing, not usually visible as the photos we're showing you of Maggie Smith, as that literalism till fantasy concepts of the moon is layered over itself. So it comes in being over itself over and over again. It's patterns on it, it's over and over again. It's like mistletoe. It's on it, striped and on it. By nuclear mitosis, Shellstrap and the Griffiths of Newton's third law, as the atom debate alone philosophies entirely true of it, a denial of it, next of it, ill of it, existence of it as shrugged, of Resica diagamethith, and Celius like until moons you shits, where it's an atheism, Boygar, Delia, Pilia, and hypotheses of Minnesota and Sheds. So the moon has different phases that rule philosophy and arguments about it. The moon is the giant orb of rock in the sky. The history of why it's all those big words is because it applies to big things and big concepts and big ways we understand things like putting out Easter eggs or certain other agreements we should not say for Easter eggs. Putting things out for the holiday, allowing it to be there, why it's human rights to exist or secret because fun. The historical figures like Santa Claus are removing of those as big philosophical concepts of you put this out, it does this thing, and that applies to the dark and lightness that you can see on the moon and the details of it, called a phase, which also apply to arguments that we just make up over time and give to it to say this is that or this is this of why it means this, like Yu-Gi-Oh cards, their faces and their backs and stuff like that. So no, Maggie Smith is a teacher of Homeschooler Catalog soon that is named after, or this moon phase, we don't know because it is to be determined, is named after. TJ Kirk is supposed to be the representation of the moon phase. Humanity does not BWO or bow to the or the moon you shits. Humanity does not bow to the moon you shits is really a name of a moon phase. It's just also counts as only the first image and not the rest after it. As you can be two moon phases at once, it just means lunar is incorporated or too much seer is as to why it existed, incorporated, and can be redone as experiments. So you can't just fuck with the moon and then it will just re-air it. It's just like a thing with solar eclipses. We technically man-made those. It technically was science. It technically was magic turned into laws and understandings later. And that's why this post is censored, but not the lecture of it. In some nations, it is reversed. So, read literally by a DFCVC Bink. So Adam in relation to them is the moon phase. Aldrich Burr is a witch with three R's, as the history of the moon phases and grandiose to it. Continuous patterns of Idris Elba IG to test as a form of intergeology of it, and splits of the past and coronical advances. So how you look at it, how it affects things, why it looks the way it does to you, why the moon phase of TJ Kirk is the Maggie Smith moon phase, and the rest of the photos are only Maggie Smith. And as you can see, there's a color difference when it's only Maggie versus TJ's golden moons. Why this moon phase, Maggie Smith, is actually very detailed on the moon, so much so you can see it in the sky as a glow on it, or it's not technically the moon phase. The rituals to create this moon phase were called Mark's house to make sure Hades is alive and immortal in the afterlife all the time because of contracts. Misrepresentatives of these contracts in backwards Burlington Goetia style. So I say half of what I don't mean honestly because of dialect, ways I say things, layers of how I say them, and the styles of extra words called slang in those things. Or like the language such as Italiano, la masciucalena, that's Italian, or Somateria sa inna nanna, that's Latin Hebrew. You can just mix two things together. It will just cause different visuals. It'll cause different metaphors. It'll cause different philosophies. Well, how do we apply this to the moon? Since we're showing TJ Kirk's moon, which is actually not called Bow to Me Mortal, it's called Humanity Does Not Bow to the Moon, you shits. That is this moon decorated with a different moon phase over it called Maggie Smith. The moon phase means in philosophies, reasons I would come up with this, why it's good for Italy, why it's good for Africa, why it's good for the Congos, why I cannot say that further, why I'd cut it off and give it to sweet things, why I'd remove that, or why I'd make it innocent, because kids just want lollipop. It doesn't mean what you wanted as the adult brown gross version, and we just like cancel it or add it as to why there's never really red on the moon shadows ever. No, there's updates that look red to it on it. There's just never red. It's a concept on it where the moon alone is to be red that was promised to Native Americas, which means we did at one point man make the moon. We just don't know anything about the asteroid or the historical files. It could have been lost to time. You can just decide it looks a certain way, and that means stuff. Okay, well, that's called a phase, as literally when it is that, or going through that, or when it's not that, or when you're debating that, or when you're talking about that, when I'm fighting back and forth to explain things. So the phase is like what it looks like if it's the moon alone or the lunar alone. The big rock in the sky, the orb, is really what its giant category is. And dragons and ideas and watermelon and the numbers and how we address them and what we call the numbers is kind of what a phase of the moon is, what it means to everything. And the moon is one way to address it by those older systems and older styles of it, as its update with SEER updating science is called lunar. That is TJ Kirk's moon phase, which I have to keep scrolling up to find the name of. Humanity does not bow to the moon, you shits. It's BWO and TEH. So humanity does not BWO to te moon, you shits, or humanity doesn't bow to the moon, you shits. Is this moon phase that we're looking at. Under it is Maggie Smith, and it was still counted for the full moon phase because of a very big similarity in visuals. What you're looking at if we're blind and you have your eyes closed, even though it would count as peeking right now, is a light pink crater to a light ashton gray crater of circle in the sky. So the round one, the orb, the sphere cut off and just placed as an imprint. That in the sky with the light color yellow into gray slightly with an orb crest of an imprint of a missing piece of it shown as the old designs of it is Maggie Smith as a moon phase. It can just be named the girl. It means she's sentiently somehow the moon phase. That's a concept in animism of objects being alive or having a vessel. She would be a vessel for the moon phase as our teacher from Homeschooler Catalog from era one of it. Yeah, she traveled back. She did era one as the theories of time travel or time zones. She is in the back. So the moon doesn't often show its rock. It doesn't often show all of those details. It does when it's suddenly this member, this phase, or this event to show this phase. And when it does, it's considered the moon phase, null egg hub. And it meets the criteria of light patterns, bold and chic, only with lightness, meaning sometimes it's red or pink, but rarely and not most shades of it. And it's fully missing a wax wane. So it's missing a certain kind of shadow, if it's this, that the moon technically almost always has on it, that lunar doesn't always mix together. So lunar x moon allows re-airings of just moon or just lunar. So you could just reset it, put out in the sky, pick where that goes, have it there. By the ritual we used for that would be the ritual to create Narvoso, which is Adam's white Cuttingham singing cat seat. It always, when we redo a white Cuttingham, just redo parts of the moon, add it all together as a cesspool called knowledge and data collection. Rituals are what we use to create science. So it was the ritual of the white Cuttingham with Mark's house together, and it recreated the moon at the level of power it was, and it would have to be a new location for Hades to own and rule as phantom neighborhoods and sharing docile things. So we just moved a neighborhood somewhere else and got an exact copy of it later through black magic powers of chaos theory. We messed with variables, we messed with building, we messed with bricks, we messed with how it was originally done, we messed with time zones. We called all of it a ritual and used magic only terms and not the updates Wicca or strawberry milk tea, and allowed a woman as a grant to be in it. And while his chest became temporarily sentient dragons, in his opinion, he still has the woman, because he was a woman who went by he, just meaning he was so old it made more sense to pretend a guy, but not really, because the hair was crunchy, or the hair was, what it should be, or like an afro in the ways of, well, on a white person, not called that. And so it was why it was allowed and wasn't allowed in his style to be lying male. So he was a woman who was doing magic with us, as to why it's rare they will participate as a choice of the group, not always some of its updates, but most of its updates. And it has met the criteria of so it's met the rules and the standards of what it should look like, as this should be light, patterned with the crescent and the giant holes of the past sections on it. It should not glow unless mixed with atheistic moon phases. So they're named after atheism. They say bow, they say humanity, they say things of concepts of four. They would claim Tyler Epsilon accidentally in the title, and it would allow why this is TJ's moon phase. Humanity does not bow to the moon, you shits, which is a golden, glowing golden moon phase that looks way more like this, with kind of star crescents on the moon over and over again. That is yet to be determined why it's in the sky early. With Maggie Smith, which is a light pale yellow or a glowing yellow from the backlight of it, giant crescents in it, shaded lightly with like a history of when it's gray or dark. It's because the crescent is too dark in shade and it's missing any of those glows. And that would be those phases of the moon when the moon just looks that glowy. In that style, it is in a setting called a phase that we've explained. It's just going through it at the moment. And so is a lot of concepts people are talking about on Earth, and you can just kind of guess because it just matches the moon so much. And it's called a moon phase, and that's what it is. A moon phase is a season of which are built to the old models of sheen and light on the rock called the moon, and not its update lunar or eclipses of lunar, as the moon calendar is an one-off Alonzi alone, a loss, a thing, and the lunar calendar after it, where the silhouettes of the old shape and style would match the original Bermuda charts of the moon. So this is the moon phase charts and the only phases the moon comes in until it is mixed with lunar and other models of itself as the rock. We have the full moon, which is love, magic, charging, healing, banishing, cleansing, clarity. We have waxing glorious or waxing gibbous, as to whether or not you'd count a symbol or an extra moon in the middle to represent both of these upside down, as the two sides of half of it is kind of curved as a shadow, hitting it till a big orb or a chunk of it, then it is like it, and it represents motivation, attraction, success, and good health, requisitions, undoing bindings, cleansing, and undoing curses. Then you have the first quarter of half the moon is covered as a moon phase of the emoji. So it's Trinativity, divination, motivation, calming, strength slash glowing, and it's half of the face on its left, so the up direction, fully considered the shadow. Then there's waxing crescent, where all of that is removed to be a side smile on it, kinda at the point of hitting up, called a waxing crescent. And under that is the dark moon, where it's fully covered in a light or a shadow of it black, and all of that is on constructions and magic, wealth, and removal of sex to be rape only as a concept of philosophy. Then it's the waning crescent, which is that same smile halfway with the black. And then the last quarter, which is the first quarter halfway, except it's down where it would be up. So the left side is now the right side, and the right side is now it's looking in a mirror. It's just half the opposite direction. Then you have the waning gibbous and the full moon again, and it is still waning gibbous, considered waxing gibbous, and waning waxing glorious. It's still considered all of those. You would just sometimes be addressed by a different name into your preference of how you would spell it out. And then it's the full moon again, and that's the cycle of the moon. There's nothing more or less to it until it is mixed with lunar, the moon's update as the same rock in the sky, and how we address it, how the concepts work, what it represents, and everything. What is the system of everlast magic crest would be applicable in religion? And that's like the rule. Would it work in a religion? Could they worship that shit? Would it be evil and false idols or missing ceramics to worship that shit? Then it doesn't ever work here. Is it really a thing that the gods and goddesses could be credited for? Then disposition and not its update for lunar and the solar eclipse. So the moon would stop at when you put magic in as a term that will supposedly never age into science. You give it that as a concept, you have philosophies and arguments of the moon. Then you cut that in half, or you censor that, or you bypass it. You no longer have that. You have its update. You now have lunar because it would make all of that atheistically to age into science or to be black and dark and evil of those concepts based off innocent foxes for real because of the solar eclipse San Francisco. And it's important that you get the San Francisco ending to that to determine theme, jobs, and genres to that, and to lack words or distilled harmony of that. So lacking things chaos as evil, gross over and over again, poison blooms, dripping and saggy dog like water, removing that of innocent until clutched and not clutched, and you do all that regardless of race, and you're moving race as, oh, that would just be evil towards all the color. You have why evil, 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 fantasy, fantasy, fantasy is what lunar would request instead of magic in its place, and you're allowed lunar, and every woman's allowed lunar, not all versions of the moon for women until they're forced into a rape thing. Yes, and concept. So, as the moon chart would summon into the first quarter, waxing crescent, dark moon, warning Gloria, last quantre, warning crescent, then full moon, and substituted waxing glorious, feet waxing globious, or waxing crescent if available, or by the end in the middle as one of them in place of words, by balanced charts of Metroid data on chaos and older dark shadows of harmony of Dura and potions, alone in the dark magics of Elder Wizard, removed waxing to crescent moon. So until certain things would hit shadows wrong, you are allowed it in those systems until the race would become obviously brown and be evil, because this system is based off Broom's VR, but pretending strawberry milk tea. So until it would be evil the second it hit a real color where you are from or applied to earth and knowns. So if on the planet Earth it is known to be a human color called a race, of which there is only black, Japanese, Chinese aged into it, but is considered Japanese. French aged into it, but is considered Japanese for real if you're talking about race. Um, Mexican and not Hispanic. Uh, Davenports of all of these labeled Indian or Native American, which is a 7 to 6 tier system, counted Japanese, where you could lie about 3 extras to 8 extras as removing Chinese and adding it. You have about 7 human races. You do. You have 7 human races. You have black, you have Asian, counting for 3 of them, then you have Mexican, Indian, and Native American. And Native American could sometimes count for 2 of them, as to why you're allowed to lie about having 9 or 8 of them. And so that's how many races there are. But there's more people colored that. That's racist to say. Yes, it is, because there's an update to race you're considering it called ethnicity, which is where you're from as an accent, or palette. Or palette. The word for color is just allowed instead of the word colored. Color is an update to palette. That doesn't count for race. Race is an update to color, and it was done at the same time. And then you have palette in between as what the eyes mean with the lips. Oh, and why is black counted both times? It's not. African American is counted in its place. To talk to a brown person and say, what is the difference between an African American and a black person like you, is super mean, rude, and racist, and you shouldn't often say it unless you're an awkward businessman. For like real, like unless you're an awkward guy or wearing the right kind of outfit. And if you don't know what that is, you just go in white without a hood or a clan. And if you can't do that, you go as a ninja. And if you can't do that, you go in a kimono. And if you can't do that, you go naked and say, and cover with a blanket and say, why is this appropriate now? And you get it. Black and African American has 2 differences as the race versus the palette. The palette has no one chosen one narrative. African American does not have a chosen one thing. It doesn't have a certain respect of ghetto and dark things. It doesn't have a respect of cling and form. and black does, and it's Martin Luther King Jr. as Adam Snowflake, and you drop it as Eldrick, and you just don't think about MPD and stuff of weird insanity, would replace it in color. And so the weird, oh, a crazy level is the thing for Masiki in color, which is a thing for African American in palette, which is a thing for black only given to them as a choice. Black doesn't have to be. So it's a choice to turn black. It's never a choice to be half African American. It's never a choice to be Masiki. And as a result, you could be white as all of these things or included in them, but you would choose to be black. And that's the difference of the color and race. Some people choose their race. You also choose to be Indian and can't go back after you once even considered that choice. And it's why you're a light or dark thing and you'd assign magic concepts regardless, even if it's all in your head. And what you don't know about race is it really just works that way as race. It doesn't work with the color or the palette Indian or Indiana. They kind of just wanted the same name as the group. They're allowed that. The second you say race, they know you're talking about the star thing with the crutch and the accent of half, and they suddenly know what I'm talking about. Yes, that one is not a choice. The other two are, and it's a three only group. So you need to know that is how it works. And Moon has races as its phases, and it has colors and palettes as its phases, even though the people that it is photos of that are meant to be its sentient somehow magically are not crazy. She is wearing it technically as the pattern chart. She technically would have to be it in the mind, and only her could technically wear this. Or me, and I would still not be named it and still not be literal of it. So moon faces can be people, and they're based on the AIs that are homeschooler catalog. They will just eventually choose to teach it when it changes for them. Oh, now that we know it'll change for her and all that nasty stuff is good, yes, yes, she'd choose it. Yes, everyone would as a moon phase. It's technically the older system moon and phases for all of it, and its updates eventually with different names to the catalog instead of homeschooler catalog, all under Knowledge Hub. So there is an official authority on this, and it's the YouTube channel you're most likely watching instead of my personal channel. But anyways, all of that is called distilled harmony. Chaos till it makes sense singing it. Yeah, that's what it is because man would sing it. White is a real concept on why shadows exist. Oh, well, you're not talking colors or race anymore. You're talking why the moon has a blur on it or details on it. Sure, we'd allow that. That's fine if this is what your organization does. It just names it and explains other things and all of stuff ever not correlated to it. Yeah, so I guess it would be why light is on waxing gibbous more than the full moon, but not light colors or shadows. It's because it's attacked to attraction as a concept, and it's attracted more to the shadow and turned away, meaning more of the back would be the full moon. It would just have to be. It's at a side angle and it just has a sliver that's not counted, where the rest would be not counted orbs on the full moon. Well, you don't know why that makes sense, but you get it. Well, at certain angles, you could move something to be fully one color more. It just means it's bigger. Well, it would count because light can be a size. Well, if it's based on light and light showing it light color and shadow showing it dark color, and it only has two, I guess it would just be honored because more of it would stretch out around it because some of it was not counted. Yeah, so it just stretched it out into a bigger rectangle. Yes, because of how I curved it. So if I curve it together, the oval is bigger than the circle. Yes, the round, tall circle is not as big as the circle. So a hand is bigger than a finger, and we usually only see the finger until you would put one finger down and notice the whole hand. So the update to science as magic is actually the update to magic is called somber, and the update to science is called seer. And these are all theories that would apply, changed in some arguments of seer, but never science. The second you want to use those old models, those old systems, those old ways of thinking, it makes perfect sense in science till a limit, and then you drop it. Then you have to apply something different of rationality to it, and that would really be seer. That would really have to be seer. That would really focus on seer. That's why I had to turn on a fan, even though I thought I could do this. And so, yeah, it's sorted by old magic terms and rationals to Newton's as atmosphere theories of seer. So, how it works, proven by experiments, is how it's shown based off tiny things called automatons of vibrating. Oh, it's soul. It's tiny little souls. And the problem with moon phases being sentient is they're all souls. So, I guess we tracked down her soul of Maggie Smith, the moon phase. It's really Maggie Smith. It counts for me as Aldrich. It does not count fully for Adam until agreeing he is Aldrich. So eventually became Adam Snowflake, Aldrich as a split of Adam Snowflake, and then it fully counts for Maggie Smith over us because women still color. It's a real thing about gender and why you can't have up as only good or white as only good or dark as only evil or dark is never good, as I wrote this lecture to explain racism to Thomas Sanders. So yeah, it's sorted by in moon phases of lunar, the update of the rock that is not the moon, uh, to be fantasy terms instead of magic as fantasy only terms. So moon is usually allowing just women in because of what it is in magic, but it only has about a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It has about 9 phases because one of them is counted twice of it. The problem with moon phases, as sorted in relation to Newton's, is actually called the Davidson chart. It is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those with the sun in the middle, counting for older terms with newer meanings to them. That just does not work in this older system. It's by older magic by wax and wax times 6 of fantasy after, because the concept was times 7. Removed by 2, added by 5, which you would count as sex instead of 6 because the number is just pronounced sex, as to how it aged, or you use older magic alchemy. So it's a lot like sagging, removing, washing, cleaning, and why it's counted young forever or wearing it. It's totally fine that it's lying pale or lying dark or it went that route, and it's totally fine it wasn't bleach or lacking because it was light and solar in the sun or something. You can just tan different races and colors and palettes. It's gross for some people to think about because suddenly it's okay he was always like that. That's a prejudice you have, or it's just so sad because you're imagining a kid or a brown kid wrong. You could be given the benefit of the doubt, or you could be correct, but regardless, the Davidson chart is why that argument is always fine to make and not applicable in the time period we are in. The Davidson chart at the end being agreed was sent back because you can send inventions back to time zones in time. So I wrote Star Wars and the White Lotus. I just sent it back so far, nobody would care. And that's why my mom secretly watched this and was so proud I wrote Star Wars. It was never this time period or eon. I also wrote Harry Potter and sent it back. And then JK had to rebrand it because she was the only one who got it. It was sent back. We did find it. We did look at it, the logo of black, pink, distorted of men and hair because it's always based on pop culture. We did look at it and find the logo of Black Pink discorded as a Misi scrub of moon rock and how it's localized to the terms of Migriki and Nigatiki. It just doesn't work with the update to the moon as lunar, even if it would for those tiny portions of culture and society to be only 8 of things. It doesn't work until their update seer or science is renaming them, until unnaming them. It's a very weird concept about the moon. Does it count if we change the name and meaning? Well, then it was a technically new moon phase, but it has to change its form of the shadow. Then it would look very different from moon phase to moon phase. This doesn't look like this because all these kind of look the same until this glowing one, but you know it's counted as both of their moon phases as to why it premieres only one of them. And that's because all of it is a dark moon. So that's the shadow of the moon. It's the dark moon over a moon that's normally first quarter to waxing gibbous on its side. You now kind of see how level that is going with the photos. And if you can't see blind, I'm explaining through the drawing thing we do when we cannot see. Oh, well, now you know you could just draw it and then you're doing it on your hand and it's totally fine and you totally get the exact photos. Yeah, I know it's kind of weird how we just all imagine that. So yeah, the moon would have to count fantasy things that aren't real because you could keep adding and subtracting till up and down is not black and white only. You would have to eventually mix the colors or have new colors that counted for the colors. So that's 7, the historical notion divisible by 2. So you move it or separate it by 2, up and down, and then the history of 6 as the word sex. It is just called sex and it's the 6th number. It's just pronounced with an E instead of an I, and it's not super intimate because we updated sex to lust as a word. So, all of this together, the problem with Davidson at the end being agreed is that for millennia in history, it was never this time period or eon. Instead of phases of the moon, we actually would count all of these as quets or crests. These are the crests of the moon as the phases that it would count for, as the moon can also refer to lunar. All of this would count for the shine of the moon. I'm sorry, we know in our time period which you lost. It would just count as how glowy it is. It would count as how sparkly some of the glowy is and not really the glow, which is the dark part, as sparkles. It would count as half of that as whatever waxing gibbous is on your chart and sun that you sent back. And all of that, because we cannot see the full thing, it would now be the days of the moon instead. So we argue it by days, which is how you feel time length stretched out, chopped up, and then how it feels like 24 altogether. So in order to do that, if we keep saying two too much, well then you count it twice to remove it as evil feeling of the time. Because you could just shorten an hour by doing something and you have to count doing something. What if I choose to end that something? You count that once, you count an extra once called division. Well, I just removed it and separated it to feel like I got it, kind of. I did all of that to see how long it would be because there's 4 and not 2 at the end of 24, and I have to count all the versions of the numbers. Well, then you just add the 2. Please just add the 2. You have 30 days now. He's right. You have 30 days. He's right to be frustrated. He's right. We have to explain it to you. 30 days, and that's where he's wrong. And so it measures by lunar chart of new autumn, whatever that means, meaning based on Butterfield Fantasy Clubs of Ashley Foundation's blog site of deletion in some nations as moved under mixes of tumblers, we would have in general nations of various to a 30-day tier list of cycles known as days, not their update songs or Mishi, as Mishi is the update this time period of this eon. We called it Misi. We know it's called Mishi. We know it says Mishi incorrectly. We say mice or Misi instead of day, like the rat species for our time period. This was the moon for, as the old world only has the moon choosing that. The history of Italy is its very different way to feel length of years, because the moon relies on imprints of intent during building of the pattern chart. It is why it's all the 17th day of waxing crest of the old systems, where the rest of the orb in the sky without default forms sometimes in Georgia just all has it of Gaskin Walk weird, but on location Gaskin Walk, which was the name after, as lunar locations are blessed or not blessed as getting grants on it, but on locations of never its update. This time period not yet sent back for foundations of river. And so the history of this location and its old systems of work mean what you call diameters. The old world never dropped the old model, the moon. They permanently have that forever. They intend the glow of words, a constant abomination, and could be terrorists to remove it. Until Italy, a lot, and only temporarily for Italy. And so it feels like this with words as a concept the phase would agree to. It feels like it matters the level of the day and range. It tends to be the level of the how far we go or how much it means. That's called a range, and we age into good quality of it as its motto, as the mood and the moon. The history of what lunar lacks to this would be the outcast things by darker palettes and shades to revoke it by fantasy numbers and colors and histories of known by Alternian blood colors, of dressing up and down the Jewish star of adornments to pinches of points of autos. The history of my life by all of these things, by Grilby and film and Netflix, concepts of how that works in science, but now it's real all of a sudden. And then fixing that by Newton's third law of light, only revoked for dark, only mixing tones of this notion allow. We allow it, mall policy. We lie all white and dark. We allow it, and then you have 12 as the rule until women hurt 3 times and you're good. Lectures of Philosophies does just work by forcing it to be 2 things only. Up, and down. The colors of how people interact with these things, they can be cruel and replace it in it only up is cruel and down is nice. But if there's 2 up or 2 down or three down or 2 up, if it's even or uneven, you will have to agree something is a choice you're counting, or only one of them would be an extra. You didn't consider called diagonal, as deified by Zeus's deification today, so the law of motion is what determines it in thunder, gymnastics, and physics. We have more directions than black and white, you dumbass. Of removal of only these things is to add many groups, and not just 2 of them, counting only one of them of gender. It would have to be, 'cause men are nice about it, bisex, and women are cruel about it, bisex, from the number 6 to intimate lust things until mother and nature, and then revoking and removing these things is the theory behind Alternian blood colors. Only 2 of dark accent privileged and light accent are woman. That of most of the world never does that. That's just fantasy. You just want to hurt people. You want it to be rape or die. You're allowed that concept on the moon. Yeah, it's shadows as to why no red. No red because red suddenly raped the moon. Yeah, that's going to be the rule. That's going to be the reason. It's going to be granted to certain things of color only as a family. Then you drop it. And that's Alternian blood colors, a fantasy concept that used to be real in Mexico. Given our only rule to fantasy that we allow, it has to be not seen as real as the only rule, or it's broken to say it, that level of assumed accent to say it, or we assume accent said there, That's assume accent now. Option you say, how you say. And speak these natures of veracity. Say fucking bullshit. Yes, the dumb one counts now. So yes, you keep it seen as fantasy of 5 will magically separate and 7 will be how you do that, called a slope axis. Axis is how we tell light and dark based on where it would go as up or down or left or right. And you apply Y to be left or righter and X to be right or darker. You now have shades in between that because of where you're putting it, and that's not normal for that, so you add Z. Z is on lunar forever. It's not only light or dark because the moon actually does not have that. It would still be X and Y, and in between would count for Z, but lunar does not. And that means with the shadows on it, with how up and down they fall on the moon, the shadows of meaning will, as a choice, be understood as lighter as all of them, or it's really reversed with what it represents as how it feels as all those ideas to it. Well, now it has to have ideas as the face of the moon. Yeah, now it does. Only now because of lust meaning darker. You would ignore darker to not be hot men only, or sexy cause men, or only valid cause men. But we now have shadows and they could be mixed in light. You would have to. Some people like both to just not believe that. One of them has to be only good things, and that would be male, because it would not rape for green or desire a feeling of it, to hold it or be maternal toward it. So you kicked yourself in the foot. People don't usually choose their colors. You're pretending that they choose the sound of the colors for most of them, not all of them. So rust, brown, gold, lime, olive, jade, teal, cobalt, indigo, purple, violet, fuchsia, women only paint until one token men ever, or AU. Because I'm mocking your accent. It sounds like a robot, you know. Thus, to keep only 2 with light or dark, your option true, you would need a caste system or a level of shadows gracing it. If it's only black and white, it is on that as a 12 if it's equal, where one is harmed by being equal, or only one of them is twice there. You have to cover up the shadow with light showing. Well, you need 3 things at least on all versions of the rock. You can't just say 1 or 2 only. Allow the trans category, allow the accent for Italy, allow Montreal French. You have to, or you lose all of French. You now know the struggle of baguette. Yes, baguette good to eat. And a male-only system of line preference of women allowed in line performance. So women can sometimes only do it until ever one specific person counted for the phase. Yeah, that is a thing on lunar. That's not a thing on the moon. On the moon, it's always equal for those groups. Chosen one shit and pink lightsaber shit is counted on lunar because the fantasy is taken seriously of extinct. It was gone. It had to at some point be real. We had to have allowed it evilly, my opinion, good, because I'm from then and I remember what it is. You had to say all of that to get that far with the shadow falling on the moon, called lyrical. Fine, you kind of just want lyrical too much. The moon doesn't have lyrical. It's up or down only. Everyone be equal there. You just don't get it. It's fine you don't get it. You want the lunar too much. Okay, well then we have the lunar. You have to allow 5. You have to allow 1 uneven hurt too much. You have to count that one for men. You cannot give it to the cruel one. And or you add too many and now you have 12, 7, or 4. You're back to the old system if it's 4 though, unless it's 2 of light and dark, because it means all 12, and one of the one is still hurt counted as all of them because woman. Seriously, you can't just argue women and men are the moon. So I assume you could even it out by 12, or make it all equal somehow, where 4 to 2 or 3 is counted as only 2, where 1 is correct and harmed, but if it's about top and chest, it's gonna be men and everyone agrees the flat one. This is the concept in science called Carlos Slytherin privilege. It is a scientific concept and is addressed in Seer as Carlos became Slytherin. Fantasy words to understand real-world metaphors by 6 or watermelon as sex. As the word sex, not 6, as 6 would be black and white only as a rape metaphor, and understood of logic or sex motions and up and down only, to have more directions of looking side to side, left to right. They would thus count for 12 full directions, some undetermined, because half of them would be allowed lie as directions like diagonals of it, crossed to the side, or lyrical or slant to new directions. And this is how shadows work and form in the updates to lunar, not the moon, as shadows and shamines would be the differences of tiny groups within them. of one which is counted as patterned and falling to say, and the other is like a watermark out of it. So the problem with the way this is proven is the words on this picture are all actually lyrical. They're falling kind of down. That is a real direction you now have to have as a direction. And it's not always falling, sometimes it's spaced out. But when it's horizontal and spaced out, it is a different direction. Did you catch what it is called? It is actually going to be a reread. So the fantasy would be metaphors of six and watermelon as the word sex, not six. To be black and white, only a rape metaphor is understood. Of looking side to side or left to right would count as a direction, like diagonals, called slant. Slant is the direction of it horizontal, of kind of falling to the side horizontal. And lyrical is it spaced out, falling up or down or diagonal. Well, we have two new directions that aren't left or right because they can turn curvy and circle-like. Good, they can be at a bend. Well, now all that argument's out of the water. 12 axis is cleanly this theory in Magi. It works only by it in Magi, and scientifically proven as chaos, and theories of it in Magi to be end results in magic. So no, magic is now technically proven real. It's fine. It's not Magi. The center of Requiem would play sides and state first. No, it's true. Some science is magic, and magic is now all technically proven. Magic is real and always to be treated as fake, or we lose a lot of this, though. You should just always not respect it on that level. And that's why I don't respect racist eavesdropping on the argument. 12 axes cleanly in this theory of Magi. It works only by it in Magi, and it's scientifically proven as chaos and theories of it in Magi. So magic has a concept that works in all of science, making it allowed to be considered real in arguments and debate. And that argument is actually called 12 axes cleanly. It works in all of Magi, but never in magic fully until mixed. So 12 axis cleanly is all of this as an argument about Maggie Smith, the moon phase. It works in science, it works in seer, it works when it's mixed with other things or numbers alone in magic. And otherwise, it works in all of Magi, proving some of Magi is always real. It's just never to be seen this way, and right down to argumentation. So it would be by shooting a bow and arrow how it falls and is off center, slant, or lyrical. As the bow shot, how does this apply to the fucking moon somehow? A lot of the shadows fall on the moon, and they're in weird directions on the moon, and we had to explain directions for a second to explain the moon. Why the moon has one solid color, then light and dark forever, until lunar, which has gray and red as everything else to allow that exact hemospectrums of color till special events and sombers. You could have red on the moon, never. A weird rule of all of it is red is just never a shadow on the moon, ever. That's what that means. Unless it was red on a red moon. It just is a thing magic says that we now have proof of in Seer and its older version science. For weird reasons, now 5 equals 6 equals 12 equals 2. All of numbers, even if summed by the square root of Hick, we don't know, which is 4 or 2.7. The square root of pi, substituting it would be 4 at the end. So the square root of pi is 2.74. 1BA or 117.5C7E, and then you replace C with the infinite numbers. And 4 at the end, removed by the variable at the end, is how math updates to its update to sound. Science became outdated. We called it seer and continued. Math became outdated. We called it sound and continued, and now they work forever by mixing stuff in. And magic became outdated. We changed it to somber, which is those mini groups like Brooms VR and Strawberry Milk Tea and T-shirts, and now it continues. So no, shadows can fall on the moon unless the shade red ever. Whatever your religion says about that could be misunderstood as your rulebook, not my rulebook here, and thus the phase of the moon. Humanity does not bow to you, you shits will never be the moon theme, as a theme of the moon is not the theory of atheism, as atheism theory would cancel all of it for purple and pink and four things and lilac and porters and parrots for moon for some reason of only 4 chosen shit, which is a thing in themes sometimes, as themes of the moon are the update to phases of the moon and also a thing with theories, laws, and motions, right down to human examples of Java the Hutt. So no, shadows can fall on the moon, and lunar can have life in ways the moon can only have microscopic barren wasteland. It's why it's regulated to up or down on the moon and not lunar, marking extra crescents, and they sometimes are always each other. You can't choose how much unless Italy for some reason. No, for real. Out of options together and not its updates because of red on the moon in a headless utopian argument of choice. And a theory that for some reason can also be atheism theory. The thoughts of how things are estranged or tortured for Christ removed to be science and metaphor, that would justify or to lack him by leaving the torture, brainwashing, or to only four things. Well, now you have an update to the moon, you can just say so, till that's the location built to it. And the true evolution of planet atheist by its magic bullshit fantasy argument. Okay, that's fantasy bullshit. You want Italy. You want the Pope Jake Calloway, whoever that is. You want the explanation of secret language plain code as if two male of sad Pokemon is real balloon, which is Seer as a concept of kidnaps called kidnaps and Mephistopheles and Seer. No, that's taken very seriously in Seer. It's real in Seer. It's never in science, but it's real in Seer. It'd be the magic argument in science. You have to erase it somehow. Its magic and science removed to be its update seer as Dunes alone, and laws and physics are the older version of Dunes that are outdated for that. Fine, whatever, we're learning a lot about you, Italy. You can't just have Newton's third law of redhead only paintings. I'm learning so much about you, Italy. You're allowed chosen one shit for deciding the moon. Okay, Italy, fine, you do. You would keep claiming planet atheist. Nobody would claim Earth evolved into pink, that level. Not even scientists, Italy. It is why you are really to vote on the moon and lunar one human time by TJ and Adams' atheistic arguments that aren't pleasant. Source: Newton's third law of motion, the stems to alchemy doctrine, Seer Video 1 on Tumblr post editorial, Tear silhouettes of youth disorders, stories, blah, 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 and conversations lecture on YouTube, the Jefferson Catalogs, Homeschooler Catalog, accessed 6-sex 3rd, 2025 by Bilgo Black Death Fan 5. Previously today we tackle I Ship It. On Archives to Ashley Emma's Fan Club Sound Off of the Library of Congress. And Congos by Seta Epic Sandri 5 of African Vernaculism and the Musa Nara Post T Otorkali Potions Magi on Ashley Foundations, the WordPress blog. Ashley is the 7 o'clock store foundations of that blog, or Captain Deal of Acrons. Locket, Black Death 5, Black Death fans, Skio too, but honestly, I'm weird. I love y'all. .wordpress.com/foundations for little sissy.wordpress.com by Remisters, Uncensored, Kikitame, Kitome, and Leishen Sealed and the Seer Debate, a fungus in premiere since the math of Klitzers of the Jefferson Catalog's Homestuck. Thus, this theory is allowed to be censored with your language and metaphors by experiments you've done by the same end result, and you chose to have it distilled. You chose that to still be sorted as Congos, and harmony and time travel argumentations of fantasy, even though it's a theory. So you just have to argue fantasy stuff when it comes to the moon or lunar. You do have to respect it on lunar in a way you don't with fantasy, as magic is only that for the moon, and the update to lunar as to how we measure it. It's just how we measure everything. It's how we guess and how we understand it and how we give it those meanings of the phase is fantasy, specifically the updates to it as well, until a certain level of yellow, thin spool, or battery, because of blood colors of Andrew Husse's Homestuck, lore outside of Andrew Husse's Homestuck, webcomic based on the musical, and the works of the real historical figure Mulan Davison and Carlos Macara in the webcomic, and that's by Albert Einstein, proven in those catalogs by Norse Code Era 5 till history. We did just prove a pull up and down weird, review and describe it twice for you, chop the video down by husband's old bow, as archery was the metaphor for all of this, and now we suddenly get it. Now we get it. That's why it's sacred in Italy. So it's how it moves, why it's known as their law of motion, cleaning up and down. I never tag my stuff. So yeah, and then I'm gonna do one more thing as to this. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. Sincerely, Audric Lamar or Adam Snowflake.